Hey, happy, what do you want to call it? Valentine's week?
Yeah.
Welcome back to Step Into the Story. I'm Barbara Tanner Wallace. I'm here with Donna Jones Allward. And each month we do a deep dive into an historical fiction novel to talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, and why we think you should or shouldn't read it. And look who joined us this week.
Hello, hello.
Sydney Young from hashtag HF Chit Chat. That is a mouthful, and I'm going to screw it up once at least.
Right. So, Sid, we've been following you online, and you've been a bit busy. So why don't you tell us what you've been up to?
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking in February. I had a lot of people asking me to. I do speak. I was trying to think how I ever got into it, but I guess it's just from being a lawyer and being opinionated about books, and so people just ask me to, So anyway, yes, I got to participate with the historical, the History Quill, and their conference, their yearly conference. That was a lot of fun. And then I presented to a women's lunch group, and that was a revite to present. So that was a great deal of fun. I think I had maybe one of them yawning, but the rest were very engaged. So, and now you guys saving the best for last. Oh, and my dog.
But I know your latest book is about Lady Bird Johnson that you're kind of shopping around. Is that what you talk about too? Is Lady Bird and the conservationism and things like that, or do you talk about anything and everything they ask you to?
It just depends on what they ask, but like the ladies' lunch, they just let me. I'm sorry, is he being really loud? It's like he hears voices. Dexter,
I have behind me, so
he's one of those that I can't put out. Like he'll throw himself against the glass plate if I put him outside. So anyway, on the ladies' lunch, it's open to whatever I wanted, and I always have a real heart for women. Being a lawyer, I can't help but have that after 30 years of practice. And so I always have it come back to women. And yes, I did bring up Lady Bird Johnson. And so my talk with them this time was just about women and telling our stories and why we maybe don't tell our stories and why we should. And I think they enjoyed it. So.
Oh, cool.
Well, the last time that you came on the show, you suggested we read Joan by Catherine Jen. And we love that book so much that we asked you to select our book again. And so you picked The Frozen River by Ariel, is it Lawhon?
Lawhon, I think.
Yeah, I looked at it and I'm like, I know I'm going to get that wrong.
Speaking of, though, telling women's stories.
Yeah, yes. And it was incidentally also a Good Morning America pick. And it's a historical mystery set in 1789 in Maine. And it's inspired by the life and the diary of Martha Ballard, who was a midwife who fights the legal system and sort of the town's founding fathers and what the justice system looked like at the time to get justice for a rape victim. So there's a ton to unpack in this book. But we want to know first, though, what made you pick up this book?
Oh, it was on my radar from the beginning. I had read, let me see, I had not read all of her books, but I had read Codename Helene.
Yep.
That is this fabulous World War II book, and she's one of Gabriella Saab's favorite authors. And so, Gabriella is a co-host with me on HF Chit Chat. So with Gabriella, there's no way I could miss one of Ariel's books. But this one really appealed to me, probably because of the age of the protagonist and the fact that it is inspired biographical fiction. I wouldn't call it totally biographical fiction because she does admit that she, really had to serve the story and it is just inspired by. But that's the main thing. I really didn't even realize, where it was set and how that would make me feel and the time frame. I just knew I wanted to read it.
I was going to ask you, because I was fascinated after when I was reading it, and then I sort of nosed around and went in the rabbit hole a little bit, and I hadn't realized at first that it was based on a real case. You just said, "Oh, you got to read this book; it's really good." So I grabbed the book. But I had never heard of Martha Ballard before.
You
Had
know,
you?
I actually think I have read another Martha Ballard book, and it may be like a historical diary, like not a history, not her diary, but I think I have. If not her, I have read another midwife in the Midwest, in the Northwest, in the Northeast. But no, I found Martha to be really captivating in this book.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved her.
So there's no way we're going to get to everything that, I mean, we could talk about on this book for like an hour, 2 hours, whatever. I just found there was so much. Barb was like, are there things you want to talk about? And I listed a couple, and then my brain was like, oh wait. But I mean, we are sort of, right? But I think like this book is a mystery, but it's about so much more than that. And it's really about what life was like for women in the 18th century. And I think for me, I really knew I was going to like it when very early on we see her attending a birth. And, you know, the man gets kicked out because it's no place for him. And it's a communal thing. Like birthing a baby is a communal thing. And I was like, okay, I'm going to like this book. And she's super strong, excuse me, but there are many instances where she gets silenced or she gets put down because she's a woman. Barb messaged me a couple of times going, I hate some of the men in this book. Like, I hate them.
A lot to relate to these days, right?
Right?
Not that I'm a man hater, but there are some men that, you know.
Like, stop with the mansplaining.
Right.
So, like, I know when I read things about how the doctor in town treated her, it was pretty enraging.
Oh, I found the doctor very enraging. And
so how did that?
Satisfying.
Yeah, so like this might be asking the obvious, but how did those scenes make you feel as a reader and as a woman?
I was amazed at how much she was able to translate it to nowadays. You know, the same stuff. You know, I mean, I just told y'all off camera, I've been a practicing attorney for 30 years. I'm an expert in my field, and I know what that's like to have that kind of thing happen. But I also know what it's like to me, the husband, Ephraim, was the saving grace. You know, without that solid man figure, not standing, you know, before her, but standing beside her and giving her support, she wouldn't have been able to do what she did. And to me, I love that. I mean, you can tell that there's a lot about their relationship interwoven into the book. And the whole time you're like, oh, just please be okay. Please be a good, solid relationship, you know? So
he was a wonderful partner.
He was a great character. And I don't, you know, this is a mystery, so I don't want to spoil things for people because there's a lot of threads in there that you're not sure about as the book goes on and once you turn the page. But I will say there's a good balance between those men and even some women in the book that just make you want to scream, and the others that are the help. So
I was saying that to Donna this morning, that she did a really good job of balancing, because I didn't find any of the characters to be stereotypical. You had even the ones that enraged me were fleshed out and had some glimmers of good character, except for, you know, a couple, but which not to spoil things, but she had a good balance of, there were decent men too. So she didn't make all men horrible. And even some that were being so obtuse and male still had really good qualities. Like she never made any, she had, and you said there were some women that were also the same way. There were women who were very judgmental and, you know, not every woman was a saint. Not every man was a sinner. And I thought that was what I liked about it.
And I think the fact of her being a midwife really helped that evolve that way, because so much of her job is listening without judgment. And I can tell you too, I was, as a young attorney, I helped battered women, and you could not go into the room, how she's talking about going into the birth, and, there'll be circumstances where she'll know, something has happened. It was either consensual or it was rape, but something has happened, and you have to put your listening cap on. You can't give them words. You can't make them say it. You just have to give them a safe place, and they'll eventually talk their way into telling you the truth. And you can smell it. You can tell when it's real.
Yeah. There's a line too where she's sitting. I'm trying to think of who she's sitting with. And she just lets, like, I think she calls it the gift of silence, but where, they just sit there and she's just there because what that woman needs isn't someone to talk to her or anything. She just needs someone to sit with her in it. And I just thought that was like, I found this really ironically, because there's so much of it that is about how women didn't have a lot of choices, or women were treated as less than and not listened to. But then I also found there was this whole quality of women who were super strong and had their own community and sisterhood, and that there was a ton of strength in those moments, even though out in the rest of the world, they were, I really hate it when people say the weaker sex, but they were treated that way. So, and not by everyone. Like, I really love the shop owner who really, like, just sided with her always. And I really liked her, and the owner of the pub. It's not Powell, is it? It's close though.
No,
I don't remember.
There's a lot. But Moses Ballard. No, it's Martha Ballard, right? So
yeah, Martha Ballard. But it starts with P, and it's Moses' dad that owns the pub.
Yeah. And I think that sets the record straight, because we all know that there is no way that those women weren't strong.
Ballard and Pollard. Yeah,
this civilization wouldn't be here if women weren't strong.
Right? Which is true. And it makes you realize it makes you appreciate what these women did. I mean, yes, families went out there, but she talked, one of the themes is about motherhood and the things that women have to sacrifice, like their children. I think, there was so many references to babies dying.
Yeah.
And, and it's, even hers in real life, Martha Ballard lost 3 children. It was, no one went away unscathed at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And the thing that kept hitting me, I go back to it when we were saying that she was a real person, and you see how little voice she had in the courtrooms, in any kind of testifying that was not involving Ephraim or her close friends, and how the hypocrisy of it, where women were judged such a different standard. And they were almost, and then you realize if she hadn't kept this journal, how much more history would have been erased.
Yeah.
And the flip side of it, she kept the journal, and here we are talking about her today.
Right.
Right.
Which is great, because she's someone we should know.
Yes. And back then women they weren't able to be on a jury. They weren't able to, be official community leaders, but they still had their ways, just as we have our ways today. So
but she couldn't testify without her husband being there.
That's what killed me.
Unless she testified as a medical professional, which is just so bizarre. So speaking of husbands, let's talk about Ephraim for a minute, because Barb and I come from Romancelandia. And, we always had a saying where if, a strong hero has to have an equally strong heroine. And so, like, we could flip that around too and say that a strong heroine needs an equally strong hero. And so I got to tell you, I love them so much as a couple. And I got some serious Outlander vibes like Jamie and Claire vibes.
You said that
from
this morning.
From this partnership, because I think both from the equally strong character standpoint, but also like how devoted they were to each other, and the fact that, you know, she is over 50, but they still have passion between them, and they like it just gave me that great feeling that, you know, this is a couple who's been through a lot together, and their love is not going to waver. And
Exactly.
right. So what are your thoughts on Ephraim and her relationship?
I'm not sure why he's barking every time you ask me a question. I
love doggos.
I loved it too, and I hope I don't. Do y'all mainly have writers watching along, or passionate readers, or is it?
I think it's a mix of both.
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully I won't ruin, take you out of the story. But when you have a couple that loves each other, and you're writing a book, whether it's a romance or a historical thriller like this one. I mean, I know this is a mystery, but to me it was more of a thriller because of the way it was written.
I think so too.
You have to have some kind of conflict. And so if the relationship is not the conflict, then, the fact of how perfect is it that she couldn't testify without him there at the trial, and you're like, is he going to be there in time? All these things that kind of keep them from maybe being able to be together in the moments that they need each other, or other types of devices that a good writer will hide in the pages to help make the relationship a source of tension, even though it's also a source of strength, So I loved it so much too. And she said in her author's note that she will always write marriages that are like that because she has a marriage that's like that. And so she just is gonna, and I'm like, do it. There need to be more marriages like this represented in fiction, and troubled relationships are not the only way to have tension in a book.
No. And I think that the other part of it is just, we were talking about, the strong man, strong woman thing. Martha is such a strong character and she stands up to so many people, but if she doesn't have anybody to bring out her softer side, she's in danger of becoming over the top.
Yes.
Or being overbearing.
But it also needs to be a man she's not going to like gobble up with the first bite.
Exactly. And Ephraim isn't. Ephraim, so he gives her someone that she can lean on and feel soft and feminine. And the truth is, women want both. We can be both, and it allows her to be. And it makes her that much more human. And their relationship was just built so much on mutual respect.
What did you think about how she flashed back and showed things in the past about their relationship? I was kind of surprised that she did that.
I was too. But then at the end, I said, it's a good thing we knew it. So then, she was dropping hints to solve the thriller.
Yes.
I was taken, because it wasn't a dual timeline storyline so much as she just did some flashbacks, but they were important flashbacks.
Yeah.
I actually think this was maybe one of the best paced and plotted out books I've read in a really, really long time. And I think sometimes too, those shifts in time, when you went back, 20 years, 25 years, whatever, that was really great when she would leave something in, the present tense on a cliffhanger and then go back. I think where she placed those, they were important to the story, but they also were perfectly timed to keep the tension going. And I was just blown away. The more I read, the more I thought, this is constructed perfectly.
It's what book it reminded me of is, did either of you read The Measure?
I have not.
It is not historical fiction, but it's similar in that you have all these different people that are unrelated, but all these little strings of storyline that by the end of the book, you realize they've all woven together into a kind of a web that they couldn't exist. The book itself couldn't exist without every single one of those storylines. And that's what this reminded me of. She created this perfect web that if you plucked one storyline out, there'd be a hole in the book. And I was so impressed with the plotting with this book.
So good. Which her other books are plotted well. I mean, Codename Helene is just an amazing book. And I love the fact that I know this author who obviously is really good at World War II fiction that can show us that there is more to historical fiction than World War II fiction. You can take a story and plot it so that it's pacey and exciting. And and
it doesn't have to be in the 20th century.
That's right. Another thing that's so surprising, that it's set post-revolution, and here I am caring.
Were you surprised at the lustiness in the town? I was making a joke to Donna.
No, not at all. I think they were very lusty.
There was a lot of lustiness in those days, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, but tell Sid the comparison you made, because I didn't get it. But again, I did not have cable when I was growing up, so that will be part of it.
I said it was like the Peyton place of the 18th century. And Donna goes, I've never heard of that, which immediately made me feel old. And for the record, Peyton Place was on when I was a baby. I didn't watch it either.
Yeah, it was. And before that, I Googled it, and it was
I read the book.
1964. So I'm like, okay, that was even before my husband was born and whatever. So but even if it had been on, when I was really little, we didn't have cable. We had 2 channels. So
I had 3 channels too. I didn't have cable either.
Had you heard of Peyton Place? Am I really dating myself?
I have heard of it. Yes. No, I haven't heard of it. Yeah.
And that was a small little town. It was a small mill town in New Hampshire where all this happened in her book.
Yeah. Really?
But it didn't have that soapy quality.
But there was a lot going on in that little town for the 18th century, and a lot of sitting around.
I also loved that it happened during winter. I mean, how many cold winter books do we get? Not a whole lot, I don't think.
Well,
go ahead, hon. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, the river, I mean, it's the title of the book, but it's such a great metaphor for everything. And so we'll wait till we get to the verdict at the end, but clearly I really like this one.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You can ask anything you want.
I asked y'all before, excuse me, before we started, if it was like anywhere close to where you live, and if it's like that, here I am in Texas, and I've read a few books set in Maine and always loved them. So I just wondered.
Probably more like I think Barb it's probably closer to what Barb, okay, so I'm in Nova Scotia, so it's a little bit different. But I would say, I grew up in New Brunswick, which is the next province over, and it borders on Maine. And I would say that it feels very familiar to what I would have in New Brunswick, I guess.
It felt very familiar to me too.
Rivers, logging, that whole, that felt familiar from where I grew up, not necessarily where I am now.
Yeah, same thing. I didn't grow up near Boston. I grew up in the western part of the state on the Vermont, New York corner. But Vermont it was the same thing. It was a lot of farms, the lumber, the sawmill, the chicken farms, things like that. So it did have that same familiar feeling. And my husband has family in northern Maine. So we've been through it. So I was familiar with a lot of it. It reminded me a lot of places I knew. And my son lives in a Vermont town that has a population of, I think he said 700. So it really reminded me of where he lived. And hopefully it's not as lusty where he is, but
I guarantee you it is.
It's not beginning to fear.
Right? You never know. You never know. So speaking of lusty characters, I found that there was a lot of, because she was the midwife, she was privy to a lot of secrets that she kept. And then there was also, so we have the town doctor, Dr. Page, who we all agree that is gross. We don't like him at all. But then there's also a Black woman named, they just call her Doctor. No one really knows her name, and she's like the worst kept secret, but also the best kept secret. And so we see through her and through Martha, we see a lot of secrets about babies born out of wedlock, which she has to announce in court, which is awful.
And the mother has to announce the father as she's giving birth,
and pay a fine. Like, it's off. And then there's like all the ones that she knows that have come early, and so there's a lot of this secrecy. But then, like you were talking earlier, both of you, about the characters being really well drawn, and how good people aren't always good and bad people aren't always bad, and I really found that the strength of those secondary characters really contributed to the strength of the narrative, and it really kept the story going because you cared about them too. You cared about Hannah and Moses. You wondered what was up with Jonathan. You care about Cyrus. You worry about Rebecca Foster, and heck, you worry about Percy the Falcon. So, right? So I think it's especially true with the secondary stories with Martha's children and the other mothers in town, that the strength of those characters and how well they were drawn really, really gave the story its heft for me. Like, it wasn't just about the trial. It was about how, well, like Barb said, it was a web. It was about how everybody fit into that in some way. Like, even Sarah White, who you don't, she's had a child out of wedlock, but you don't actually understand how what happened to her fits into the whole overall plot till you get close to the end, and you're like, well, damn. So I don't know. It's just, I thought it was just constructed brilliantly with great characters, and
it's a good book to study for sure.
Now, did you guys read the author's notes?
Yes.
It was one of the best author's notes I've ever read.
It was.
But, like, seriously though, like, I know I do this all the time now, but if you're watching this, do not read that note until you're done the book. And I mean, she even puts that, like, don't read this if you haven't read the book from cover to cover yet.
Now, we will say that it is based on real events, so we're not spoiling anything. That a lot of the stuff, I mean, she took a lot of literary liberties, but the part that got me at the end is that her great granddaughter was the first the first female doctor who graduated in the United States. Her great granddaughter was one of the first physicians, and one of her nieces was Clara Barton.
Yeah, he founded the Red Cross.
Yeah. You're like, okay, so she really did have a legacy. And the bio, I think that you were talking about, because I went and looked it up. This is the first time I've ever said I'm going to go read the source material, is that book read a Pulitzer.
Oh, so, really?
It was called The Midwife's Tale by Laura Ulrich, and it won the
Pulitzer. Yes. Okay, that's what it is.
And I'm like, I'm going to read that book now. So, and I did love it. She said that she had terrible spelling, so she said she had to take liberties with some of the diary entries because she made up a lot of spellings.
And that's the thing is, even if you've read that Pulitzer Prize winning book, this book is a totally different encounter. This book is a narrow time frame. She's really filling in some things we don't know. Really interesting.
It's great. The whole thing unfolds in 3 months, something like that, 3-4 months.
But November to April.
Yeah. So are we going to tell people to go out and get this book?
Hell yes.
For sure. Yes.
I know it's only February, and it seems like we always do this in like February or March, but I'm like, this is a contender for my favorite book of the year.
Yeah, it's up there.
Yeah, it was
once again. You picked a winner, Sid.
I was looking online because last time we talked about Joan, as y'all mentioned, and we talked about how it was really being ignored, we thought, by its publisher. And I was glad to see on Goodreads it had over 6,000 reviews.
Oh,
Nice.
good.
So maybe we did
Really?
help spread the word. I don't think this one's going to have any trouble. I'm noticing it ticking up on
Everywhere.
selling lists.
I hope so.
Yes.
I think if you're a woman, I'm going to pass it on to my friend who's a big reader. I think if you're a woman and you will truly appreciate this book because there is so much in it. I mean, we just skimmed the surface of how much is in this book.
And to me, it's if you loved Where the Crawfish Sing, it's the next got the whole, kind of the environment. It's got a murder mystery. It's got some town secrets. It's got some problems, that we still deal with today that are a little bit taboo to talk about that maybe shouldn't be.
Yep.
It's got everything.
There's a lot of Me Too in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I would heartily recommend it. And I am a total World War II, 20th century. Like, I love that time period. And so sometimes I'm a little resistant to read stuff that's older. But this was fantastic.
Well, interestingly,
Fantastic.
I've had 2 people this week, random people, tell me that I should read I Was Anastasia, which she also wrote.
Right.
And like out of the blue, like I was saying, I'm reading The Frozen River, and they're like, "Oh, you should read I Was Anastasia. That one was really good." And I guess that one hit the New York Times list. So now I have another book on my list.
So now that we're going to have to glom it and her books and then add to our TBR stack.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Sid.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thanks, Sid.
Hey, see, before we go, what are you reading now? Since clearly you are the expert at picking books.
Yes, so we can go by what you're reading now.
I actually just finished 2 books. I had a slow start to a month, but I read The Women.
Yep.
And it made me cry. Hannah Brand, right?
Right.
And then I had a fun read. I read Allie Hazelwood's Bride, which is a love story about, to me, it's Taylor Swift and I'm going to get his name wrong. Trevor.
Oh,
Travis Kelce.
Yes, Kelsey. In The Vampire Werewolf,
Okay.
Yeah. So the werewolf is this big, stocky guy, and we don't see that kind of character very much. So it was fun. So I've got to decide what historical fiction I'm reading next, but I just read those 2.
What are you reading, Donna?
I am reading Fast Girls by Elise Hooper. And I'm also reading, I'm almost finished, Every Time We Say Goodbye by Natalie Jenner, which is her next. I've got an arc of that one. So that's what I'm reading. So the Fast Girls is part of our reading challenge.
I saw that and I want to do that. That sounds good.
So that's the first book I'm reading from our reading challenge. And then the other one is an arc I got from
I read that and I really enjoyed the setting. It's in Italy. Fun.
I've got it on my Kindle. I've got the arc on my Kindle. And I actually just bought Queens of London. So
nice.
Heather's book.
Yeah, and that sounds super fun.
There were so many, like I just need to sit down and read for a week.
Yeah.
It's too bad I have a book to write.
Right.
There's that too. Oh, the stupid writing I gotta do.
Right. Well, here's the fun thing though. I have about 5 fiction books I'm also reading for research for my time period. So I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna save those for last of my books that I have, and then I'll dig deep into like nitty gritty stuff on the web for like just little things that I still need to find. But yeah, so I'm holding on to those. So I've got like 5 Titanic set fiction books to read.
I've got one of those on my Kindle too. Probably the same one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, y'all totally influenced me to read Unsinkable. Y'all read that last
Yeah.
night.
It was good.
It was so good. Yeah.
Yep. Jenny
we had a
Walsh.
lot of fun reading that one.
So y'all are sharing all the book club.
Oh, well, and next week, okay, so coming up, we have our featured author next week, and I'm kind of annoyed because her book's not out in the US for another 2 weeks or something like that. I went to buy it, and it's out in Canada because Donna got it, and I'm like, oh, well, if she's got it, I'll go get it. It's in. And my friend at Barnes & Noble was like, no, not for 2 more weeks here.
So who
I have
is
to
it?
wait. It's Codename Butterfly by Embassy Susbury. Susbury,
Nice.
I should pronounce her correct
It's
name
the
right.
Josephine Baker story. It's based on
Oh,
Josephine
okay.
Baker.
Yes, I've
which,
seen.
yeah.
We have been saying that someone should write this book for I don't know how long. We kept trying to get Piper Hughley to write it.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and Piper finally wrote back, it's in the pipeline, just not by me. So this must have been the one she was talking about.
Yeah. And it looks really great. So, and so Embassy is going to be on the show in 2 weeks.
Perfect.
Yeah. And then March's Book of the Month, which we'll start putting up on our Instagram and Facebook, is The Phoenix Crown, of course, because Janie Chang and Kate Quinn, we've been waiting for this one for a while. So The Phoenix Crown is our March Book of the Month, and we'll have our book chat about that.
Yeah, I need to just wait until tomorrow rolls around, and then I can start reading that one. So
really, the show is just our excuse to justify reading these books, and we just say, oh, because we have
and gushing, and then we get to like publicly gush, and then maybe somebody else buys it. I mean, that's really the whole purpose.
Yeah, and we'd love if people like took the recommendation, because Good Morning America is not enough.
That's right.
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 You know what? I wonder if she sells. I bet you she sells the movie rights to this. That would make a good movie.
Would make a great movie.
I hope that Netflix is listening.
Lots of small town characters to stir the pot.
I'm so glad you came on, and I'm so glad that you picked this book.
So much. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's always
if we can't.
I appreciate what y'all are doing to share all the historical fiction book clubs too.
Well,
if we can't get enough historical fiction.
If we can't be with you in person, it's great to have you on the show.
It is. Thank you.
I haven't seen you now since June, right?
Yeah.
So at some point we'll be in the same geographical location again.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll get Donna to go out and do some book signings in Texas.
That'd be great.
She's got a beach read coming out.
Yeah, well, maybe. I'm just, I'm a little overwhelmed. So trying to go through launch stuff. So we'll just see.
But we will definitely have you back on again. We you want to come? We're going to do what was a part of our reading challenge is the Rich and the Czar, and we're having one of your cohorts on in September.
I saw that. I'm so glad. glad.
We finally managed to hook it up. She was having a terrible time with every time we booked it, some deadline would crop up, and it was just
so she's in our reading challenge this time, which is really great.
That's great. She just got her draft turned in for the next book. So the Haunted Manor, I can't remember the full title, but
love it.
That'll be perfect.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. The book again, The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon, and go out and buy it. So.
All right.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
See you next time.
Bye.